Good afternoon. This press conference concerns Mr. Chad Taylor's candidacy for the United States Senate. As you all know, Mr. Taylor stated yesterday that he does not wish to continue his campaign for the United States Senate. I have been meeting today with the attorneys in my office as well as with the Attorney General and his office to assess the requirements of Kansas law in this regard. Kansas law stipulates a process whereby a candidate's name may be withdrawn from the ballot after receiving his party's nomination for that public office. That law is found at Kansas State Statutes Annotated 25-306B, and we'll be making copies of that available to you today. The law states that a candidate's name can be withdrawn under only two circumstances. Either number one, the death of the candidate, or number two, a formal withdrawal of candidacy in the event that the candidate is unable to serve. The law also states that any withdrawal must occur within 7 days after the meeting of the State Board of Canvassers. That deadline was yesterday at 5:00 p.m. In the case of a living person who is incapable of serving, the law stipulates two requirements that must be met. Number one, the candidate must, quote, declare that they are incapable of fulfilling the duties of office if elected, end quote. And number two, the candidate must also file a signed, notarized request in writing with this office. Yesterday, in the last hour of the last day to withdraw, Mr. Taylor did the latter, but not the former. We have received no declaration from Mr. Taylor stating that he is incapable of serving. The law is very clear on this point. We now have no choice but to keep his name on the ballot. But just to be certain, we also researched the legislative history of this law. Prior to 1997, in Kansas, the law did allow a candidate to withdraw for any reason with no such declaration. However, in 1997, the Kansas legislature changed this. In order to facilitate the efficient administration of elections, the requirement of a declaration of incapability of serving was specifically inserted into the law. That is consistent with the plain reading of the statute, and that is the shared unanimous opinion of the attorneys in my office and the Attorney General's office. Accordingly, Mr. Taylor's name will be printed on the ballot on November 4th, 2014. It is our reading of the statute that it has to be in writing, but it may be in a separate writing, but it has to be either contemporaneous with the request of withdrawal or prior to the request of withdrawal. Excuse me? He does not need to state his specific reason, but he has to simply state that he is incapable of serving. As a point of fact, most of the requests for withdrawal that we receive, indeed all of the ones that I have seen in my tenure, do state a reason why the candidate is withdrawing and why the candidate believes he's incapable of serving. For example, in 2012, there was a candidate who was residing in Idaho when he filed for office in Kansas and stated his intention to move to Kansas. He subsequently decided that he wasn't going to move to Kansas, and that was the reason that he stated in his request to withdraw, because he couldn't serve as a representative of the Kansas legislature while he resided in Idaho. You'll have to direct that question to him. No. No, we have not, in reaching this conclusion, we have not consulted with any other attorneys other than the attorneys in this office. Because this was an obvious question, and indeed our review began the moment we learned late yesterday that he had filed such a request, because the statute does very clearly require a declaration of inability to serve if elected.
So how much research do you have to do, and how long did it take to come to this conclusion? Because we were thinking maybe 12 o'clock and 3 o'clock press conference. So how typical the process was?
Well, we met for many hours. I guess the total number of hours would be about 4 or 5 hours. We wanted to make sure that we looked for all case law interpreting the statute. There is none because of, in this specific context, because it's a relatively recent statute, 1997. We also wanted to look for case law interpreting the phrase incapability, or specifically the phrase incapable of fulfilling the duties of office if elected. We also wanted to look at past examples of people who have filed such requests and declarations. And we did all of the above and looked at the past practices of this office and made as thorough a review of the law as we could. And we also wanted to involve the Attorney General's office. And I would again reiterate the Attorney General's office is in complete agreement with this assessment of the statute.
So Taylor issued a statement saying that he confirmed multiple times with Assistant Secretary Bryant that he had fulfilled all of the requirements to withdraw. He issued a statement saying that. So does that mean that it was actually Assistant Secretary Bryant who dropped the ball?
No. During the course of our review of this matter, we questioned Mr. Bryant about what he said to Mr. Taylor yesterday. At no time did Mr. Bryant state that the filing that Mr. Taylor gave was sufficient and valid to withdraw his candidacy. Mr. Taylor is an attorney. He is capable of reading a statute, and the statute is very clear on this point. And I would note that many non-attorneys have withdrawn from office in the past, and they have all read the statute and understood that it requires a declaration and have made that declaration. Mr. Taylor, an attorney, evidently did not want to make that declaration, and I suggest you ask that question to him.
So the bottom line is, he's on the ballot as the Democratic nominee. The Democrats can't replace him because that deadline is passed. But, of course, nobody can make him campaign vigorously for the Commons, right?
I'm aware of no statute that allows anyone to compel him to campaign vigorously.
Kris, did you have any conversations with the Republican Party about this? Have they been in contact with you about this issue?
No, we began researching this issue well before I understand that they made a statement this morning, or I heard about it this morning, but no, I have not met with the Republican Party officials.
Have you had any conversations with them about this at all?
Not with the Republican Party.
Did
I have.
statement influence you in this decision?
No, this has nothing to do with the party. The law is the law. Frankly, I wish the shoe were on the other foot, and it were a Republican's withdrawal we were talking about. But the law is quite clear on this. It says a declaration is needed. I served as a law professor for 15 years, and I taught statutory interpretation. And one of the most fundamental rules of construing a statute is that every word has to have meaning. You can't read a statute so that the words don't have meaning or so that some words are ignored. And they very specifically in 1997 inserted this requirement that the candidate must declare that he is incapable of serving in the office if elected. Those words have to be given meaning, and that is what we're doing. I do not know.
Is there a mechanism for objecting to your decision?
If a person disagreed with our decision, there's not a mechanism described in detail in the law, but of course the courts are available. If someone were to disagree with our decision, they certainly would have recourse to the courts.
Did your candidacy commission that last week, would that be an appropriate place to be adopt your decision, or is it already suited at least two votes there anyhow?
We have not researched that specific question. I think what you're asking is does the State Objections Board have jurisdiction to review this matter? I will defer that question until later. If a request is made to the State Objections Board, we would have to assess the jurisdiction of the board. Well, for me, it's a legal question. Does the board have jurisdiction? And the Kansas statutes state when the board can meet and under what circumstances.
Could Jack Taylor just withdraw his voter registration? Someone told me that would that make him ineligible for the ballot?
That's an interesting hypothetical question. We haven't looked at that. I do know that the U.S. Constitution states that the requirements, states the requirements for serving the U.S. Senate. The Kansas law does not state requirements; it only defines residency. And the U.S. Constitution requires that a senator be a resident of the state when elected. It does not say that he must be a registered voter in the state. And I'll just add that we have informed both, we've informed the campaigns of Mr. Taylor and Mr. Roberts. We have not informed Mr. Orman's campaign yet of this.
What is the deadline? You have a deadline coming up pretty quickly for certifying
Yes.
the ballot.
Yeah. There is another very important impending deadline, and that is September 20th. Both federal law and state law require that we send military ballots out 45 days before the election. That 45-day deadline is September 20th. As a practical matter, the ballots have to be printed before they are sent. So realistically, everything has to be set by September 18th to give the counties enough time to print their ballots and then get them in the mail by September 20th.
Is it tomorrow the day you send the list of certified candidates to the county election?
Under normal circumstances, yes, we would be even today. We were preparing. The assumption was that we would be sending it out today.
And is there a mechanism by which, like, theoretically, between now and 5 o'clock tomorrow, whenever the Democratic Party could replace the candidate?
Well, under these circumstances, they are not eligible to, or they do not have the legal ability to replace the candidate because Mr. Taylor is the candidate. It is fixed, short of some sort of injunction or some other judicial action barring the state from proceeding. The decision is made.